hello. My name is Margie Taylor, and my co-colleague is John Palia. We are here. Our goal, obviously, today is to help you with your thoughts and actions that you're all considering during these times with the virus. Know that we are all available to provide additional help and consulting if you need it. As you can appreciate it, and we do too, there's a lot of news and information going on about this situation. Just so you know, we at Strategy Solutions, we're not validating any programs or approaches or regulations. We ask you to do that with your boards of directors and your legal counsel, but we are here to offer you and to serve as a sounding board for creative and sound opportunities and strategies for your organization. Just a couple things that we have here as we're starting our webinar. We are muting all of the lines except for John and myself, your speakers. If you have, please use the chat feature to ask them, and we will respond at the end of the webinar. We are recording the webinar and we'll make it available on our website. All those registered will get a copy of the presentation slides by Monday morning. So knowing that, we'll move on, and thank you again for joining us, and we hope we can provide information that provides importance to you as we move forward. So we'll go on to the next slide. And on the next slide, you can see John and myself. I am retired. I worked at University College and Economic Development Corporation and retired most recently from Penn State University. John, would you like to introduce yourself? John?
Hold on.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. If you could introduce.
Okay, great.
Great.
We had a little problem
this morning
with sound, so hopefully you can hear me well now.
I'm
John Papalea, and a retired hospital CEO. I actually spent the first part of my career in manufacturing. And I have a message in that says I'm muted. Am I okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. Spent the beginning of my career in manufacturing and auto manufacturing, so I have a little bit of a wide variety from 20 years in a not-for-profit hospital to the last 5 years in a for-profit rehabilitation hospital. It's a pleasure. I've only been with Strategy Solutions for about 3 months, but hopefully can offer you some thoughts and opportunities by some experiences that I've had. So I look forward to it, and maybe we can get started with the slide, Ann. Last week, Debbie Thompson, who's the President and CEO of Strategies, advised me that there was a not-for-profit, a rather significant not-for-profit, having some problems, and they were really afraid of what was happening in the middle of the COVID-19 virus. The CEO was concerned about how to make payroll. The CFO had other concerns about what was next, and it was really kind of a feeling of a panic situation of what do we do. And what we did with them is to just say, let's just stop for a minute. Let's take a snapshot of your business environment. What's happening tomorrow? What's your cash on hand? What's the next thing that you can expect? And let's identify the needs of your business quickly so that we can take action in the same way and get a quick understanding of how we can support the business, support each other. I always try to start with a little bit of almost a word association game to say, I say green, you say grass. I say, what's your biggest concern? You say blank. And we move to work on those quickly because in most cases, you're going to identify your problem instantly just because of your experience. So then we start to say, let's see what we can do. What are those issues? And really look at them under three buckets of your business and its operations, finances, and human resources. There, of course, are all sorts of aspects of your business from safety to compliance. But when we're really going to take a snapshot and say, something's going on, something's different, and we have the COVID virus, the pandemic going on, let's look at our three key business aspects first. If you'll hit the slide, Ann. So what's happened? Where do we stand? And so what's happened was really a big question mark for this company, and I'm sure it is for all of us. It's not what happened with the virus, but what's happening in our business due to this pandemic situation. Are we going to lose employees? Do we have employees who are ill, who are going to be caregivers? What's our next step? Is our funding going to get into trouble, which Margie's going to spend some time with in a little bit here. And where do we stand now? What do we do? Let's take the snapshot. Next slide. You know, there's three steps to this, and you as leaders in your organization, along with other leaders, sometimes you may be the only one, but you need to really stop and identify what your issue is. Verify that. Make sure we're thinking the same way. When we were looking at the company last week, the not-for-profit last week, the CFO and the CEO, well, both working together very closely, but they both had two different thoughts about where their problem was. Let's verify the biggest problem. Let's agree to that. And that needs to be an agreement versus an understanding or a consensus. You need to agree so that we start to work rapidly on the right things we need to do in this environment. And slide, please. One of the things, and Margie, I'll have you do a little color commentary on this, but I always like to, whether in a critical time or just in a business decision-making environment, do a G and an O analysis. And it's a quick tool that I think will help you in many of your decisions. And first of all, it's a G is, can you as a group, let's say, for example, the CEO, the CFO, and the COO, can you as a group solve this problem? And if you can, do it. Move forward with that. Do you need help? The help may come from your board of directors. The help may come from managers that you have, or even staff employees. The issue is, once again, if we identify it as an N, get the help and then take action. And if it's completely outside of your authority, and we all deal with those things that are maybe regulatory or governmental, you know, it's outside of our authority, make recommendations. Or maybe it's a board policy that you need to have a change to in order to take your action. Make recommendations, get your board involved, get whoever that may be involved, and move forward to make a recommendation to get yourself to some decision making. Margie, do you want to say anything about that?
I think one point about needing help is that we, as directors and CEOs, development officers, at this point in this crisis, we have a right and responsibility to say to our board of directors and to volunteers, this is how you can help me. I need A, B, C, and D. Where can I put you in? So it's not yes or no, you're going to help me. This is my expectation. We're in a crisis situation. You're going to make a difference. And you're going to make a difference by doing this. For example, you have an event that's been canceled. All right, so you're looking at ways to keep those people involved, those who were attending involved, occupied. You have individuals who have paid to attend the event. You can do an email indicating, please consider allowing us to keep that income as a gift. You have major donors who may have made major commitments as sponsorships of that. Those people perhaps should be called. And you can get a volunteer to make five calls, 10 calls, you work out the script, and you're asking that major underwriter to keep that with your organization as a gift. Or if someone was on the cusp of making a commitment, that individual corporation should be called as well. So it's more asking for help, but also understanding that you're setting the expectation that they will help. That's your frame of reference. That's it, John.
Very good. Let's go to the next slide. So, and becoming a leader, and you'll hear me refer to that word a lot. I think Margie will as well. Is cohesion, working together is more important than ever during this time. Use your team to brainstorm and problem solve, and what we do together. You know, and the environment, I would tell you right now, you really need to work together with your team, your board, and make sure you're making good, sound, quick decisions. We spoke this morning that kind of the concept of best is better's worst enemy. You may not be hitting the bullseye, but you've got to hit the target and start to work together quickly in the midst of all of this. So many companies right now are almost paralyzed in what to do. You have, we'll talk about some questions. We had a question about, what if I'm a fee-for-service organization? What do we do? And it gets into some very difficult decisions when it comes down to your work team, your employees, and really your most important assets there. So work together, and Margie, what you said this morning is make sure you've got your board and your external partners on the same page as you as well.
Absolutely, yes. And again, setting that expectation, these board members are on that board. It's a privilege to serve on a board of a nonprofit, and now is their time to shine.
So let's go to the next slide. I call this my shampoo slide. Lather, rinse, and repeat. Communicate, question, and repeat. It's so important right now that we really understand what's going on and really understand what are the impacts to your business, to your employees, to your stakeholders. So talk about this. Take this beyond the C-suite, if you will, if you're that big, if you're a hospital, if you're a larger not-for-profit. Get it beyond the C-suite. Talk to your managers, talk to your supervisors, make sure we know what we think is going to happen to the business, what is happening to the business. Question those issues, go back and do it again, and then get ready to rapidly take action. We did this with the other company last week. Honestly, we spent about 4 hours. And in those 4 hours, we were able to drill down to what their significant problems were and have an action plan, and it worked out very well. It feels like you could just work and work and work on this, and there's a number of problems, but you're going to know your businesses, your workforce is going to know your business and what you're trying to achieve and your mission. And if you communicate that, you'll get to your answer. Next slide. So we'll start with operations. And your chief operating officer or you as the executive director, what needs to be done? We've identified our biggest challenge, what needs to be done, who will do it. This is the accountability part of this. This is no different than what we should be doing in our businesses day to day, but this is a time when we're going to call ourselves to action quickly. And let's make sure we're not doing what we don't need to be doing. I think so many times that organizations can become productive at what they don't need to do in the first place. This is going to mean getting down to the bare bones. What don't we need to do? And then we also need to start to think about who's going to be impacted. From those we serve, our customers, to our employees themselves, and how can we minimize the impact of this situation, and what can we do differently? And once again, it's accountability to that, and you'll find that within your operations. Next, please. Margie, you want to talk about the financials?
Yes, so we're talking about looking at cash, where you can get resources. There's an opportunity here. It really is not, it's dire, but there are options, I think, available to you as nonprofit development officers and CEOs. You can do, as John said, that look at your financials and drill down on those, see where something can be changed, altered, deferred, certainly. And then there are ways to work with funding sources that I'll talk about later.
And I'll keep referring back to the not-for-profit last week. The CEO, when she did the quick analysis, her biggest concern was, are we going to make payroll? And of course, that got my attention very quickly. When I spoke to the CFO said, look, cash on hand as we can cover 2 more payrolls. So they were both right about their situations, but it did take some of the emphasis off of what we were going to do tomorrow morning, because we had just made a payroll and we had 2 more of those down the line. Our issue had to be, let's get to our stakeholders and find out if we're going to have work in 2 to 4 weeks. And then additionally, if we don't, and we have to make those difficult decisions that impact people's jobs, will we lose those employees for good? So many times, and this is an area I'll try to be fair to them and keeping a little bit confidential, but the business they were in, they could have lost key people and would not have been able to hire them back once this gets turned around. Because I think we all have to keep in mind, all right, this is going to turn around. We've got to get through the very difficult time right now and then get back to business. We don't want to damage ourselves with actions we're taking today that's not going to give us the opportunity to be back in business as strong as ever. And maybe even more so, this is the part about thriving. We may find that this is going to lead business opportunities for us as we go through the next few weeks or months. I just don't want to miss identifying interim actions. Once again, this is that best is better worst enemy. If there are things you can do to help your business, to keep your nose out of the water, make sure you do those. And the ones that work well, you may want to continue to do them. But you may have others that are going to fail. Go to the next opportunity and see what you can do. Next, please. So I'm a very strong believer in those human resources. And I in every business I speak to, and I start to think of them as your family. What would you do? How can they help us? And then how can you help them? Think of them as a last resort to your financial concerns versus, oh gosh, we need to lay off. You very well may need to do that. But if you put that at the end of your thought process, you may find other opportunities and you can preserve those human resources that we know are so important to us. Make no mistake, this is going to lead to job loss for a lot of folks. Recognize that you must take those actions when it comes down to it. But let's try to be as human with those resources as we can. And don't assume they really understand. We're probably looking at this. We're on a conference call today. We're watching the news. We're listening to everyone we can to say, what do we do in a situation that's quite unlike anything any of us have ever dealt with? We can't assume that our workforce is going to really understand what it's going to mean to us. And that's going to lead us into the communication side of this. Next slide, please.
Okay, this is Margie here. Let's talk about finding cash for operations, unrestricted gifts. And just a point that John and I would like to make, we are veterans in this field. We were working on 9/11, the 2007-2009 recession. We've been in touch with folks in Seattle on the West Coast where this began. Here in the States, at least initially, and have worked with them, talked to them about lessons that they've been learning and how they've been approaching some of these. So given our experience, John and I, we've been through several major crises in the United States, and the country has come back and nonprofits have come back much stronger. So let's look at how you might be able to take some actionable steps right now in terms of finding cash and resources. Look at repurposing existing gifts. If you have a gift for a piece of equipment and you're not going to use it, and that gift is restricted, call the donor. Ask the donor if you can use it. Tell them why you need to use it for unrestricted, and it's part of your game plan now. If you're providing services for students in schools, students are not in school anymore. They're at home. Yes, you could reach them virtually, but the process that you had in place to reach them in schools is different than what needs to be set up in terms of virtual learning. So could you use that gift, a corporate foundation, individual gift, now for current important occupational needs, unrestricted needs? Talk to the donor, whether corporation, foundation, foundation or corporation, to get approval. Document that conversation via email if the donor says yes. Take notes, what we call contemporaneously. While you're talking to the donor, take notes. I do that all the time. And then that's what you use to follow up with your email with the donor and ask the donor to acknowledge. That way you have a string of conversations that you have at least on writing that the donor has approved your step if you need to. Review your gift agreements. You may have gift agreements that allow you to take the gift and repurpose it. You may have gifts that you're receiving through a gift agreement where that cannot be done. If it cannot be done, is the donor still with us, that you could call the donor and say, I'd like to change this gift agreement to allow us to use these funds now for the crisis that we're facing. And if the donor agrees, again, get something like that in writing so you have documentation. If you have a gift agreement that says first preference is for this project, that may give you an option to use the income from that gift or that gift for something else. Now you need to talk to your legal counsel about that. Again, we advise you always talk to your legal counsel and work with your board of directors. But those are ways that you can take existing gifts, existing income from perhaps endowments, and repurpose it. Every effort, some language you may want to use is that every effort will be made to use your gift as intended or as close to your intent as possible given these circumstances. So again, work with your legal team and your board of directors. Once you find some of these things, call the donor, see if she or he is amenable to that. Second, call your donors, call your major donors and talk to them. They are worried about you. They're worried about their families. They're worried about you. You're worried about them. They want to hear from you. I took a look and I give to myself personally, I give to 5 nonprofits. I haven't received a call from one of them. All right. So, and I'm not, a huge major donor, but I am a donor. And so I would suggest that you take 5 donors, you give $5 donors to your board chairman, your development committee chair, and you ask them to call those donors. You write a script, you get the script in place, and you make those phone calls. And even if you don't contact them, you leave a message. They know that you're concerned, they know that you're calling. The second part of that in calling your donors is that you can tell them how you're responding to this crisis and what role the organization is playing in your community or in your region or in the nation. That's very important. The reason why is that your donors give to multiple causes, and other organizations will be doing something similar in terms of asking your donors for funds. And it may be that your organization does not appear to be one of the 4 or 5 or 6 charities that are more directly involved in responding to this crisis, when indeed you have a very important role to play, but it may not be visible. So what you're doing is planting the seed with the donor that this is what we're doing. We're public broadcasting, for example. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing in our community. These are the voices we have. These are the people who are participating with us. We're getting information out. We may not be doing childcare or elder care, actual childcare or elder care, but we're providing a vital service. So consider that in terms of calling your donors. The other part of that is that if you have a donation coming up and the donor says something about it, let's say a gift is usually made in July, just tread lightly on that. But if they open up that opportunity, that gives you an opportunity to talk to them. Approaching public and private foundations, you're seeing how they're going to, we're seeing all over the nation how they're going to respond. A number of them are loosening the purse strings on their grants. They're setting up rapid response funds all over the nation in many, many communities. These are funds that may have a 48-hour approval process. You simply need to not simply, but you need to make your case for support. You may want to advocate too, if you're in a position to encourage foundation leaders to distribute more than 5% of the required minimum distribution. This did happen after 9/11 when foundations were made decisions to distribute much more than that 5%. So this is something that we need to advocate for, and foundations indeed are doing that. Loosening grant requirements. You may want to ask the foundation, if you have a current grant, if they would loosen those grant requirements so that you can use those funds for immediate needs. And again, make the phone call, then follow up in writing. So the rapid response grants, they're there. Many of them, we've been in touch with folks in Seattle. Seattle Foundation was probably the first. They're looking at food security, care for children, serving the elderly and vulnerable populations, hardship from job loss due to COVID-19. All right, so how do you position your nonprofit to be part of that mix so that you're seen as a group that is, that is part of that? If you have estate gifts there, that you've booked with individuals, or individuals have called you and indicated an interest in setting up or establishing an estate gift, I would suggest, and again, you'd have to script this, that you call these individuals, you inquire, you talk to them, tell them what you're doing as a nonprofit. And depending on your relationship with the individual, ask if the individual would early activate that estate gift. Would they be in a position to do that to help you with operating funds? Now you'll have to look at your wealth screening on these individuals and see what they might be able to do. For example, if you have someone who has you in their estate and they give you $5,000 a year, could they make a second $5,000 gift, this month, next month, to help in this crisis? So take a look at that cohort. Call those donors anyhow, those who have made estate commitments, but think about how to appropriately make the ask if that situation lends itself to it. Okay.
You know, a couple of thoughts on top of it, Margie. First of all, I love what you say about contacting your donors. I will tell you, my history with this shows that you have more of a chance of offending a donor by not asking than you do by asking. There are so many times that people think, well, I don't want to make the ask. Well, you have a high probability of offending someone by not asking them rather than asking them. Even if they can't do anything at that point in time, you will gain the respect to say, look, they reached out to me, they're thinking about their organization. And use relationships. Go ahead, Margie.
On donor advised funds are generally managed by community foundations and others. And what I would suggest is that if you have an individual who is, from whom you have repeatedly received gifts through a donor advised fund, I strongly suggest that you call that donor. You continue to engage her or him in your organization. Again, let them know what you're doing and ask them for their continued support for your organization. Again, if you're not one of those 3 or 4 sectors that have been identified by these rapid response funds, it may be that the donor advised fund would be directed to something else, the donor thinking that another organization is going to be able to do something more effectively in the community. So please call those individuals who are associated with you, the donor advised funds, and make your case for continued support. Utilities, landlords, vendors, they're in the same seat as we all are. There may be an opportunity, may not be an opportunity. I think utilities, because they are publicly managed, may be in a position to defer payments, certainly individuals, and we see landlords in New York City, et cetera. But keep an eye on that and see what can be done there. In terms of financing, there's a lot going on there, as you know. The SBA Small Business Loan Disaster Fund has been activated. There's an immediate human relief fund. And again, that has to do with food security, homelessness, childcare, elder care, and those who are jobless because of COVID. A number of communities, as I said, are doing rapid relief funds. For those of you with casinos in your backyards, casinos, at least in Pennsylvania, are generally managed by authorities, casino authorities. They are required to give X percentage of dollars to the communities and around the municipalities in which they are located. One in Erie just put together an immediate human relief fund for nonprofits in their region. And they also put together a civic institution deferred loan program. And this was a loan program for civic institutions whose missions may not necessarily be related so much to the initial ones I talked about, food security, homelessness, but that have an important, substantial role in the community. So take a look at, there's information on the SBA Small Loan Fund that provides working capital to nonprofits, 2.75% interest rate, up to $2 million. So, and we can help you take a look at those. And again, as John said, look at your budget, see what your needs might be, et cetera. In terms of virtual fundraising events, I'll just touch on this. I know many of us have had to cancel or reschedule, although most of what we're hearing is canceling those. Again, those individuals participants who have participated and paid their dues, ask them to consider, keeping that, making that a gift. If the event is 2 or 3 months away, I would suggest that you look at continuing it virtually and look at a technical provider who could help you offer that event virtually. Some very creative virtual events are going on out there, and we can help you do that, to strategize how to do that, to make your event virtually. And many of us obviously are working from home, so we're doing virtual, we're learning virtual, we're buying virtual, we're educating our children virtually, and we can have fun virtually as well. And your event can be a lot of fun. if you're looking to do that in terms of, in a virtual event. So think about that. And again, let me go back to positioning your organization and using volunteers. Your nonprofit may not be among those 4 or 5 that are perceived to be of utmost importance at this point, but they are. So I want you to, get the phone, call 5, 10 donors a day and touch base with them. Get your board chair, get your directors to do the same thing. You can do assignments. This is a critical time, but this is how we get through it and we come out stronger. So that's some ways. And if you have other suggestions, we'd be happy to, to hear them as well and share them with the group. So we'll go on, Ann.
And just quickly, it kind of fits what Margie's saying. I did hear this morning, I heard the medical director of UMass, he said, we hear all about social separation. He said, my thought is we don't need social separation. We need physical separation, but we need social closeness now. Doing some kind of fundraiser while people are maybe in their home for 2 weeks at a time can give them a different sense of purpose, can give some excitement, and quite frankly, some fun by doing that and a feeling of doing good. I just think it's really important. I'll follow what he said, and I told all my children this. I said, we need physical separation. We need social closeness now. And I do believe that those are things that will really help us thrive. As we said in our title, more so than sitting back and saying, oh no, what do we do? And communicate. I had the opportunity to consult with about 20 different companies in the late 19.
Did we lose John? Yes. Okay. Let me just follow up on what John's saying in terms of communications. And this, and I've made the point about donors and others. One point I think that we can use as local nonprofits or regional nonprofits is this. Donors, your donor dollars will do more locally and be more effective locally. There are going to be appeals, and there will be tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that go to national and international nonprofits. And that's important. That's important. But the point I would make with your donors and with your regional bankers and businesses is that gifts that go to your nonprofit in your region support the economics of your region, support not job creation, but the jobs that are there in your region. They are impactful. They serve your neighbors, they serve your friends, they cost less perhaps than national organizations, and you may not receive any funds from a national or an international organization. So we talk about buying local. Well, my mantra is give local. Please consider doing that. I think that's a very persuasive case with your donors, your banks, your foundations, that they can infuse cash into your by donating money locally first. Yeah, John, we just went through the communications one. So can we go on? Ann? Here's your external support. John, do you want to, are you back on? Okay, well, we talked about external support, what's happening in and outside your market. You can certainly see what's happening, nationwide. There's a lot of great.
Am I back in?
Out there, your needs. One piece of advice that we give to you is don't do anything you don't need to do, and please don't worry about perfection. You don't need You don't need to know that, you know, that you need to have something, be good, look good, be your best, but don't spend hours on it. You know, let's get it out the door. Let's get the phone call done. Let's get the script written, and don't spend time doing things that you don't need to do. So we'll go on to the next one.
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yes, John, you're back. We're going to go on to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, everyone.
So we thank you for your participation today. We invite you to have some questions for us. If you'd like some assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're Strategy Solutions. We're based in Northwestern Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Greensboro, North Carolina. Do we have some questions?
We do have a few. The first one is, our organization had to cancel a conference event that was a major fundraiser. What should we do to recoup that revenue?
Many organizations obviously are going virtual with that. Even AFP, so the ICON conference, International Association of Fundraising Professionals, is doing its conference virtually. It was scheduled for Baltimore. We can help you do that. We can help you reschedule that, put it in place, publicize it, and help generate that revenue that you need for you. And in fact, it would probably be even more impactful today, given what's happening nationwide and globally. So we can certainly help you with that. Other questions?
Another question we have is, hospitals are in a situation where they have to do many additional community benefit activities because of the pandemic. How should we be thinking about accounting for all of these additional activities?
I think that's a great question. And there's a couple of things that I would comment on. First of all, I would make sure I accounted for it, because it may help you show your purely public charities. That may be true with many other nonprofits, that you may be called upon to do things to help out during this situation. I think you should keep track of it and account for it, and hopefully that can be part of your charitable mission. And the reality of it is, it is part of our missions to go out and help as non-for-profits.
Last one I have is, many of our nonprofit activities are fee for service and we cannot operate because they are shut down. What do we do about our staffing?
This is a tough one, and I think many of you may be feeling this. I would try to hold on to as much of your business as you can. Then at the same time, you're going to have to look at work reductions. And I think bringing your employees together to talk about this, it may be an opportunity where you're going to talk to them about voluntary layoffs. You may have employees that are saying, hey, look, I'm okay. I'm in that point in my life where if I need to not be working for a couple of weeks, it's not going to impact me that negatively. But we have some other employees that work with us that just can't sustain this. I'll take the layoff. I'll work less. I'll take a reduction in wages. I'll take a reduction in hours, and work together on that. I know a company that reduced people's hours, and they did it so that the employees could get unemployment. At the same time, they sustained their jobs. It's a really tough question in the fee-for-service world. That's one of the things I think we can help with the most. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions about that if you're in that situation.
A few more came through. So, do you have any specific advice for organizations whose ability to provide direct services is presently prohibited by mandate?
I'm not sure what the questioner is referring to. If you're receiving a federal grant and you're doing specific services, there may be an opportunity to talk to the agency to determine if there may be ways to provide those services a little differently. But if John, do you have any thoughts on that, or do we want the?
And I was going to ask you if you could read that question again.
Sure. Do you have any specific advice for organizations whose ability to provide direct services is presently prohibited by mandate?
That is a tough one. And I think it's one that I would document the daylights out of it, number one, because it may come back with it. Somebody's going to challenge that. And it probably takes a legal review. You know, if somebody says, you can't do this anymore, but you're mandated to do it, it's a bit of a catch-22. I'm not going to tell you to jump to legal questions quickly, because, you know, once again, we're going to get into cost, but I think that's when I would probably reach out for some help.
Okay, we have a couple more coming through. So the most critical work my organization does for vulnerable and elderly populations is in the home. What are your thoughts on pitching our importance in surviving as an organization while unable to directly do our main work?
Yes, but two things. One, you still have to be there. I know it's home-based care. There will be ways, I believe personally, that the medical establishment and the federal government will determine are appropriate to provide that in-home care.
Yeah.
It may not be right now, but it will come to that. And you need to have that kind of capacity built into the system. John, what are you thinking about that?
Well, first of all, your universal precautions are going to change. You know, typically you've probably been going into those homes with just good hand sanitizing and not much more. This may be the time when you're going to be gowning up your employees and putting gloves and masks on them. We have to protect our own employees as well. So this is an important one. This is an infection control issue. This is a spread of disease issue, especially with these elderly patients. I would strongly recommend that you get medical advice on how you should enter that home and absolutely follow those rules.
And do we have other questions?
How can we continue our work with limited resources?
Let me suggest this. I know we talked about looking at existing gifts, et cetera, but one area that has come up several times is partnering with another nonprofit. You have limited resources. Another nonprofit may have maybe a little bit stronger than you financially, but they may have needs as well, and you're both working in the same area, the same sector of the economy, the same neighborhoods. How can you partner with that nonprofit and work together to better delivery services, or to simply to continue the services that you were offering? Funders are very interested in collaborations and creativity. This is an opportunity to look at collaborations. And if it isn't evident to you right away, call a couple of your colleagues and say, all right, this is what we do. Is there an opportunity for us to collaborate? Our funds are very, very low. Is there a way for us to deliver some of these services working with you? There was actually one community foundation that put an RFP out a couple of years ago to encourage collaborations among nonprofits. This is certainly a time to do that. And that may be a fundable idea as well, having two nonprofits collaborate in terms of continue to provide services. We're breaking down the barriers in this case.
And I would also go on to tell you that you have to analyze what the problem is and what you can and can't do. we have to prioritize and analyze. There's going to be decisions that need to be made of what we can't do. Margie talked about earlier about saying, you know, let's make sure we're all on the same page, singing the same song. That's very important to us from an operations standpoint as well. That you as leadership need to be saying the same thing and saying, look, there's frequency issues and there's impact issues. This is one of those questions that you're going to have to deal with impact first. And what's going to have the most negative impact towards your clients and your people, and address those things first.
We do have a question about what, you know, how do we track and monitor what's going on federally and statewide, whatever state you're in. I would call your local senator, he or she, whether it's a senator or representative, he or she probably has conference calls going on for people in the region. Ask if you could be added to that, or have one of your, you know, maybe your board chair does this or a volunteer does that to keep you up to date as to what's happening at the federal level and at the state level. So please consider doing that. We know of lots of instances where this is happening, and you are getting, our nonprofits are getting information that way from their elected officials.
Use your associations and your chambers. In my local community, what they're proposing is members of the chambers are trying to do a conference call with a chief staffer from one of the congressman's office. So you also get to hear the same message together at the same time. You know, many of you, I'm sure, are part of an association. See if that association will get the information for you. And it just helps with a little bit of strength in numbers. And I think your representatives will appreciate it because they can do one call instead of 10 calls.
Yeah, and they know what's going on in Washington or Raleigh or Harrisburg. So they're, you know, they're doing this. I think they're doing this a lot these days. So do we have any other questions, Ann?
Nope, that was it.
No, not hearing any. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we'll be sending the slides out. There will be a recording. If you need some assistance, please call us. You have our emails there. We are happy to spend 30 minutes with you next week and talk more directly and deeply into what your concerns are and help you to answer your questions and prepare a plan for moving through this. Again, John and I you know, have worked through this a couple times before in our careers. Nothing like this, obviously, but something similar. So please take heart. You know, we will get through this together.
And we will certainly try to get back to you very quickly and provide some help and support just as quickly as we can.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, Margie and Ann, and to all of you as well. Stay healthy and safe.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.